Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our initiative Mission Mains 2022, where we are doing the most expected questions for the upcoming mains examination. And today, being Tuesday, we are taking up history. And within history, we are talking about modern history. So, one is the role of women in the freedom struggle, not role actually. Yes, one of them is the contributions of women, so role of women. And other is, if you look at the social religious movement, women was a predominant subject. They were very, very important. So, so the issue of women was there. Besides women, there was a caste issue. Okay, so this was there. Now, just giving you some hints besides this, like how did the Gandhian movement transform the role of women in the freedom struggle? So that is again a theme over here. Then we can also talk about the revolutionary freedom fighters amongst women. Then we have one question on Revolt of 1857. We're talking about the causes associated with Revolt of 1857. Then from world history, Partition of Africa and Germany and World War II. So here you will learn about the World War II and naturally the role of Germany over here. So when we say role of Germany, if we are critically examining the role of Germany, to what extent we can blame Germany over here, we have to bring out the other aspect also. So this is an approach to answer writing, actually. That is why I'm sharing. So World War II and Partition of Africa. And one more reason of sharing this is that typically you will have this issue of content. Sometimes you will be flooded with a lot of content, but sometimes you will not find content. Now here you would see that how much we have to study in accordance with the word limit, 150 words or 250. You will see that we really don't have to study so much. Okay. Coming to the first question. So let us see, and I'll keep discussing the structure side by side. So the women's question arose in modern India as part of the 19th century social reform movement. So when we talk about 19th century, we're talking about this time period. So during this time period, there were certain social reform movement which were addressing certain issues. Most famous ones being Raja Ram Mohan Roy as Brahmo Samaj movement. Then we have Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, Mahadev Govind Ranade, some names, Arya Samaj movement. Now, Arya Samaj, Raja Ram Mohan Roy would say that we have to work with the British lobby and bring about a reform. And Arya Samaj would say, we have to go back to the old system. We have to go back to the roots. So revivalist kind of movement. Invariably, all these movements were during this time period and women was an important subject matter. We also have certain laws that the British had brought in. We have to mention that. So abolition of sati. So they brought in a regulation to ban sati. Then the Widow Remarriage Act, the Age of Consent Bill, right? Age of Consent Bill to deal with the issue of child marriage. And what else? So Age of Consent Bill, we have Remarriage Act, abolition of sati, abolition of female infanticide. So this we get. So women's issue was very important because their conditions were not very good. Okay. Now you can start your answer by first talking about why, briefly just giving an introduction as to, you can just state the obvious that women's question, the issue of women was predominant during the social reform movement. You can name this movement where women was there. So in the introduction, you can do, and you can also bring out the aspect in the next para, or you can just extend this, that British also brought in certain initiatives like abolition of sati, Widows Remarriage Act, etc., which were dealing with the issue of women. Now state what were the major issues that the women had faced. Now, if you mention all of this, naturally, your issues thing will get overlapped. So now mention the issues. The prevalence of sati, the child marriage, infanticide, inheritance, don't have equal rights with reference to inheritance. Okay, so there were issues which they were trying to address. Now, when we have certain issues, naturally, when people are addressing it, when people are taking certain steps, there will be certain disagreements. So that is debates, views and counter views, debates. So debates concerning women in that period. Now, with reference to this movement, there were certain contentious issues or certain debatable issues, which were, should we work with the British? The British is bringing about a law. Raja Ram reformists would say, yes, absolutely. While an extremist leader would say, no, age of consent bill, we don't like this. Bal Gangadhar Tilak, why is the British bringing in a law? We are self-capable of doing things. The movement, you see, all men dominated. No women participation over here. Women are not taken, no representation of women with reference to the social reform movement. Then, when they brought in the system of education, it was to bring in a wife with certain virtues who was self-sacrificing, or with reference to British, a Victorian helpmate. But this was challenged by the progressive women who said this idea, who rejected this idea of a compliant and domesticated wife. Right. So you bring in this debate over here, and then you just write a conclusion, and this has to be obviously enumerated, and then just write a conclusion, which is to sum up your points. You can also correlate with the present times, like this is some thing that is on ongoing process. Now, coming to the next question, define the barriers of age, gender, and religion. The Indian women became the torchbearers during the struggle. Let me just highlight this struggle of our freedom in India. So, define the barriers. What were the barriers? Right, age, gender, and religion. There were certain barriers, but suddenly, and that was not suddenly, it was Gandhian movement which had actually transformed this movement. So women overcame these barriers and actively participated in the freedom struggle. So this is the tone of this question, if you look carefully, because why would they have such a statement? The statement is because women were highly constrained. There were a lot of restrictions. They led an excluded life. But we find women who were to be limited to their house and household chores, they are actively participating in the freedom struggle. So we see active participation. And by active, really active, they are courting arrest. They are organizing, for example, we have B. Amma, the mother of Ali brothers. So they were associated with the non-cooperation movement. They took in Gandhiji, the Khilafat movement, they took in Gandhiji over there. Okay. Then we have Durga Bai, who collected over 1,000 Devdasis. We have examples of Sarojini Naidu. We have women like Usha Mehta, who played a important role in organizing underground radio stations. So this transformation has taken place. So this transformation has to come out in your answer. So your answer, please be careful. Your answer should not be about just stating what all things were there or just giving out the examples. The aspect of transformation must come. The aspect that the women had barriers and suddenly they became torchbearers during the struggle. So this aspect has to come, right? Your answer should not be just this. You have to, that is just for example's sake, that is just for your reference. Okay, so this is basically your answer. What were the barriers? You can start by stating this. What was the compliant domestic wife? Then the transformation had taken place during this, I think specifically during the time of Gandhi. Women, the family that was very conservative would say, okay, fine, women going out, courting arrest, that's fine. They are picketing shops, fine. Swadeshi and boycott, fine. Everything fine. Underground radio station, fine. They had that confidence. that the Gandhian aspect is also to come in over here. Moving to the next question, the revolt of 1857 was the culmination of the recurrent big and small local rebellions that had occurred in the preceding 100 years. So 1757, that means to 1857, roughly. Preceding 100 years of the British rule, elucidate. So this question is actually about the culmination. It is about the causes of the revolt of 1857, which is phrased in a way which says culmination of the recurring big and small local rebellion. And we have to agree with this. There is nothing to disagree. Right? Even if it had said something else, actually, we would still have to agree on this thing. This is the popular view amongst the historians. So if we look at this way, let's discuss the structure directly. So revolt of 1857, like you can start, it is seen, it's mentioned as the first war of independence, given its scale, given its size. This is over the entire northern belt. It was there, except for some pockets. So it was there. It was a movement which would have overthrown the yoke of British from India. So that could have taken place. But it was not like there were certain conditions that made the revolt of 1857 ripe. There's something suddenly happened. There was a long-standing resentment against the British Raj. So the preceding 100 years, we have number of incidents of Sepoy mutinies. Now you start giving out these points. Sepoy mutiny. Revolt of 1857 was said to be a Sepoy mutiny. So there was a Sepoy mutiny that was taking place across the country. There were peasant uprisings. Peasants were not happy with the land revenue system, the money lender system. The conditions of the peasants were getting very, very bad. So in different pockets at different times, these rebellions were taking place. These are for your reference. Then the issue of religion. The British were bringing in legislations like abolition of sati, widow remarriage, Religious Disabilities Act, etc. Then the encroachment of the missionaries. So all of this, it felt that the purpose of the British in India was to make this a Christian area. So this wasn't liked. Right. So the systems the British had brought in the last 100 years that had brought in local rebellions and tensions. And obviously not to forget the princely states. Rani Ki Jhansi, for example, very important example. The Nawab of Awadh that being taken over by Dalhousie. So when their kingdoms were falling and then they were coming under the British rule directly, the people were facing the misery by the new system of administration. So revolt of 1857, somewhere all these, it precipitated, it culminated. All this combined together, the emotions over here, and this led to the great revolt of 1857. So this is all you have to write in this answer. It is not so much of giving this yet. This is just for giving examples. This is not really, and this should never be your answer. Right? So this flow, this connect has to come. And yes, you have to conclude, of course. You have to, depends on your introduction, what lines you have said, you have to conclude over here, right? Don't repeat the introduction. That's what I'm saying. Africa was chopped into states artificially created by accident of European competition. We all know Africa artificially created. You see the map, straight lines, not possible. So naturally, it is about the partition of Africa. That is the theme. And it is asking us about the cause of this partition. But obviously, it is phrased by the accident of European competition. It is asking us about the role of the Europeans, but then accident of European. And now we have to establish what was this accident. Okay. So I think you can go straight forward. You just have to go with the flow, or you can talk about, we'll first do the points over here. Okay. So initially, Asia was taken over. Your India and Asia was taken over, whatever was to be India, China. America was already a colony that had become independent. Then the Latin America, that was also taken. So what was now left was Africa. And with Africa, all they had was the coastal side over here. Right. So they had this because this was the route of the ships. So till that much extent, they had taken over. But with the but now you can talk about uh, but in the 1884 Berlin conference hosted by van Otto van Bismarck. So Bismarck, the partition of Africa was decided in Europe, and that had led to the scramble of Africa. Right. So you can talk about this you can start your answer by referring to the Berlin conference and then give out the reasons. Now you can give out what was the accident, what were the events that led to accident is an event basically. So now you can give out the points. Americas and Asias were already colonized, and now there was a lookout for a new land, and Africa proved ideal. There was exploration going on within Africa. There was industrial revolution, which was not just in Britain. So it came first in Britain and then other parts. So we have industrial revolution that took place in different parts of Europe, and now they were looking out. Each country was looking out for having more and more colonies. They were getting more and more of imperialist. And with industrial revolution, they wanted raw materials, and they wanted more markets for the mass produced things. Okay, so this was there. So bring out. So this had taken place in Europe. Further, this was accentuated by the events of unification of Germany and Italy. Both took place around the same time. So that had actually, Germany also, they also wanted to get into the race. They also had gotten industrialized after the unification took place under the charge of Prussia. And likewise, in Italy also wanted a stake in this region. So all of this had actually, this is the accident of Europe, and this had led to the quick partition of Africa. Right. So this has to be stated over here. That's all. And this is the European competition only, each country looking out to have more and more of colonies. So there was a scramble. They were quickly looking at getting more and more of territories. Last question. To what extent can Germany be held responsible for causing the two world wars? Discuss critically. Fine. So this is naturally when we talk about these two world wars, Germany played a very important role, and Germany lost both the times. But the thing is that Germany was not the sole reason. There were other factors also. So when it says to what extent, so to what degree can we hold Germany accountable? There must be other factors also, so that has to be important. So when you study the causes of the World War II, so it's basically the same thing. Its only thing is that we have to identify responsibilities of Germany and then the other factors. We have to segregate them. And then obviously conclude over here. Right? So conclusion is important because it says discuss critically. So whatever our observations are, we have to mention that in the conclusion. That's it. Now you can start your answer by first talking about the immediate event that led to the World War II, particularly the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria by a Bosnian Serb. So Austria and Serb were having tensions anyways. So this had perpetuated the World War over here. Now, this was not the only reason. See, fine. So you mentioned this in the intro. This was not the only reason. There were other factors that played that led to the World War, with Germany playing a very, very important role. Now, next, make a heading with reference to the role of Germany or responsibility of Germany towards the causing of the two world wars. You mentioned this, and then you mentioned the other factors. Okay, so let's see the pointers. So first of all, the Franco-German War. Right, so the Franco-German War, that is the unification of Germany. So Bismarck had designed the unification of Germany in such a way that he wanted Germany to emerge as the superpower in Europe. France was the main continental power at that time, so it was designed in a way that France would be defeated and humiliated, and there was also an Austria war also that had taken place, but Austria and Germany, they became allies. Okay, so it was designed in such a way, and then the France was humiliated after this war. So Prussia, it was actually Prussia-French war, and then this led to the unification over here. Now, when this war ended, there was a Treaty of Versailles. So this treaty was signed in France, and is signed in such a way that it humiliated the French. Okay, so that was the first event, Treaty of Versailles. Then, naturally, Bismarck knew. Bismarck, under whose leadership unification had taken place, Bismarck knew that France is a very big country, a very important country. They will not take this humiliation lying down. It's very important to them. They will take a revenge eventually. But he also knew that France alone cannot do anything. They cannot defeat us. He knew that. So he knew that he has to take steps so that the French are isolated. So he founded a series of alliances designed in a way to isolate France. But there would be some opportunities in the France is obviously England and French being enemies, they somehow they become allies, they become friends, right? So there were alliances and counter alliances that took place. Now Bismarck was no more. Bismarck was a pragmatist, and he found series of alliances. No, and nobody really knew actually what about those alliances. Not to write actually, Now there was a lot of confusion. Okay, it's only after the death of World War and death of Bismarck, and then after the World War, people analyzed the causes, and they were really confused with what all treaties Bismarck had signed. Okay, so alliances, a lot of alliances were there. Then after Bismarck, the forward policy of Kaiser William, the next emperor of, not really the emperor, I mean he was the next emperor, Bismarck was the prime minister. Okay, so Kaiser followed a policy, Kaiser William followed the policy of forward policy. So that meant forward policy means an aggressive policy. And during that time, it made sense in the sense that all of them were looking at expansionism, nationalism, the nation states had emerged. So jingoistic nationalism that was there. So he was following a forward policy, having more and more of territories. He was investing in navy, industrialization for making weapons. So that was taking this thing. And naturally, UK felt threatened. Why are you making navies? Navies are the main. So they also made their navies. Other countries also reacted accordingly. So that was there. Okay. So forward policy of Kaiser William, and then the event that led to the World War. So World War I ended. Then comes the emergence of Hitler. But now, before the emergence of Hitler, when the World War I had concluded, the French had won, Germany had lost, and the French again signed the Treaty of Versailles. So in the same room where the Treaty of Versailles was signed first, Germans were called and they were humiliated. So the Germany always felt that this Treaty of Versailles was a national humiliation and they could not accept this. Hitler took advantage of the situation and became their premier. Okay, so emergence of Hitler and the policies of Hitler eventually led to the World War II. So this was the responsibility of Hitler. But there were other factors at play too. For instance, the role of France in humiliating Hitler, humiliating Germany, the nature of Treaty of Versailles, the way it was signed. Then the British, between the First World War and the Second World War, the British and the French had followed the policy of appeasement. The Germans had stopped agreeing to some of the terms associated with things associated with the Treaty of Versailles. They were supposed to demilitarize, but they were militarizing. They had taken over Czechoslovakia, but they were silent on all of that. This was a policy of appeasement that was going. One reason could be that they were concerned about the rise of communism in Russia, and Germany could be a buffer state in between Russia and the democratic West. Then the failure of the League of Nations. After the First World War, they've realized a lot of treaties, a lot of alliances are there, a lot of mistrust is there, which should be addressed. So they formed the League of Nations, which is known as the predecessor of the United Nations. Okay, so the League of Nations was formed, but that was not effective enough to address this issue. The League of Nations should have been able to avoid the situations that led to the World War. So that was a failure. And yes, during this time, there was the emergence of the jingoistic nationalism. Not naming anybody. Okay, so this was there. Now mention the give your conclusion over here. So naturally, Germany had a predominant role, but there were other factors at play too. Others were also responsible to the events that led to the world wars. Right. So that way you have to conclude. Okay. So this concludes our session. So thank you for streaming in to our channel IES Primers.